Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. Arracourt, Lorraine, France. September 19th, 1944. It's dawn, but barely.
Yeah.
There's this incredibly thick morning fog clinging low to the ground. It feels almost otherworldly.
Yeah, like everything's underwater almost. Visibility would have been terrible.
Exactly. And inside an M4 Sherman tank, one of the newer ones with the 76-millimeter gun, you've got Staff Sergeant William Denton. He's trying his best, peering through the periscope, trying to pierce that fog.
It must have been incredibly tense. The smell of fuel, the engine noise, just waiting.
Right. And next to Denton, there's Corporal James Hartley, the loader. He's just finished stowing some gear, but the crucial thing is what he puts in the ready rack. The first round that's going to be loaded when they make contact.
And it's not the standard round, it's something different.
It's the M93, the hypervelocity armor-piercing round, HVAP, gleaming, slender, and totally against the rules.
That round with its tungsten carbide core was like gold dust. They probably only had, 3, maybe 5 in the entire tank?
If that. And the doctrine, the manual, it specifically said not to load that first. Save it. Conserve it.
But Hartley loaded it first, defying the manual, defying the training. Because he understood the brutal reality they were facing. He knew what was likely waiting out there in the fog.
And that's really the heart of what we're exploring today, isn't it? That exact moment where survival just flat out overrides regulation. You really need to grasp the math behind Hartley's decision. It wasn't just a whim.
No, not at all. It was cold, hard calculation. They knew they were likely up against Panthers. The Panzer Kampfwagen V.
And the Panther. Well, it could kill a Sherman frontally from 2,000 meters. That's over a mile.
Right. Meanwhile, the Sherman, with its standard M62 armor-piercing round, it simply couldn't penetrate the Panther's front glacis plate, not at any practical range. Zero chance.
So think about that disparity. The enemy can reliably kill you from 2,000 meters away.
Yeah.
But for you to have even a chance against its toughest armor, you need to get within maybe 100 meters, maybe less, to hit the weaker turret mantlet. Point-blank range, basically.
It's not a fair fight. It's doctrine essentially ordering you onto a suicide run.
So Hartley's choice. It wasn't panic. It was pure logic, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Risk assessment under extreme pressure. If he loads the high explosive round first, like the manual says, because the Sherman's supposed to be supporting infantry.
Right, the HE round.
Then the Panther, which is probably already loaded and aiming, gets the first shot. And at those ranges, the first shot is the only shot that matters. The Panther wins.
But if he loads the HVAP, that precious unauthorized round,
then maybe, just maybe, they have a chance to fight back effectively at the ranges where they're actually likely to encounter the enemy. It gives them a fighting chance, however slim.
And Denton, the staff sergeant, his response was key too. He apparently just said, load the HVAP first. If command asks, I gave the order.
That quiet agreement, that acceptance of responsibility, that's the moment the tactical revolution really begins. Not in some planning room, but right there, in the turret.
So we're going deep into this grassroots change, driven by sergeants and corporals who were willing to risk disciplinary action, maybe even a court-martial, just to survive the next encounter.
Yeah, and to really feel the weight of that decision at Arracourt, you need to step back and look at where American tank doctrine came from. It was largely shaped by experiences back in North Africa, 42, 43.
Right, when the M4 Sherman, with its original 75-millimeter gun, was actually doing pretty well.
Exactly. It was up against older German tanks, then Panzer IIIs, the early Panzer Vs. And against those, the Sherman 75 was, well, it was adequate. Its real strengths, though, weren't necessarily its gun. It was reliable, had great endurance.
And importantly, it had a really good high-explosive round. Great for infantry support.
That was key. That multi-role capability, infantry support, exploitation, breakthroughs that became the cornerstone of the doctrine. And this was heavily influenced by General Leslie McNair.
McNair, head of Army Ground Forces, a very influential figure right up until he was killed in Normandy, actually.
Very. And McNair had this rather rigid idea about specialization. He believed medium tanks, like the Sherman, should not be the primary anti-tank weapon.
It feels like a critical point. He's saying the Sherman isn't supposed to hunt other tanks?
Pretty much. His concept was that specialized tank destroyers, TDs, often faster, sometimes turretless, but always with a bigger gun, though usually less armor, they were supposed to handle the enemy tanks. The Sherman was essentially relegated to being mobile artillery for the infantry.
Okay, so that decision shapes everything that follows.
Yeah.
Tank design, how crews are trained.
And critically, how ammunition is stored inside the tank. It all flows from that core assumption.
But the problem was The Germans weren't sticking to McNair's script, were they?
Not by 1944, no. When the U.S. brought in the 76mm gun for the Shermans, starting around January 44, it was an attempt to counter the newer German armor. But honestly, it was an incremental improvement, not a fundamental shift. It didn't really change the doctrine.
And that 76mm upgrade had its own issues, didn't it? I remember reading it wasn't universally loved.
No, it had drawbacks that actually hurt its primary doctrinal role. For one, the 76mm high-explosive shell carried less explosive filler than the old 75mm HE round.
Less bang for the buck, essentially.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as good at supporting the infantry, which was supposed to be its main job, according to McNair.
Precisely. And second, especially in the early batches, many 76mm Shermans didn't have a muzzle brake.
Ah, right. So when it fired.
Huge muzzle blast kicked up enormous clouds of dust and debris, especially in dry conditions. This completely obscured the gunner's vision right after firing.
Making it hard to see if you hit anything or spot other threats. Kind of defeats the purpose.
Exactly. They tried to fix the armor penetration problem, but in doing so, they made the tank arguably worse at its intended infantry support role and hampered its ability to effectively engage multiple targets or adjust fire quickly.
And this doctrinal thinking was literally written into the manuals. You mentioned ammo storage.
Yeah, Technical Manual 9-1731B from 1943. It was crystal clear. He rounds, the high explosive ones, had priority in the ready rack. That's the small storage right near the loader for immediate access.
Makes sense if you expect to be firing HE most of the time.
Right, but the armor-piercing rounds, the AP, they were supposed to be stowed deeper inside the hull, often in bins that required the loader to physically turn away from the gun, maybe even traverse the turret basket to reach them.
So slow to access. Seconds lost when seconds counted most.
Seconds that meant life or death once the Shermans started running into the main German threat in Normandy and beyond, the Panther.
The Panzer Kampfwagen V. It really changed the battlefield calculus, didn't it?
Absolutely. It started appearing in mid-43, but by the Normandy campaign in summer 44, Panthers made up something like 38%, almost 40% of the total German tank strength in the theater. It wasn't some rare heavy tank. It was becoming the standard opponent for the Sherman.
Let's just nail down why it was so feared. The specs are pretty chilling.
Yeah.
That gun.
The 75mm KWK 42 L70. The L70 means the barrel was 70 calibers long, very long for its size. This generated extremely high muzzle velocity, over 2,900 feet per second.
Which translates directly into penetration power, enough to go through the Sherman's front armor at.
Over 2,000 meters, comfortably.
And on the flip side, its own protection.
Revolutionary for the time, it had an 80mm thick glacis plate, the front hull armor. But the key wasn't just the thickness, it was the slope, 55 degrees.
Ah, the sloping. That makes a huge difference, doesn't it? Increases the effective thickness the shell has to penetrate.
Massively. That 80mm sloped plate offered the same effective protection as about 140mm of vertical armor plate. The standard Sherman AP round just couldn't cope with that.
So the U.S. military must have realized this pretty quickly once they hit Normandy.
Ah, yes. The wake-up call was brutal. By July 12, 1944, after just over a month of heavy fighting and heavy losses in the hedgerows, the Ordnance Board issued its findings.
And the conclusion.
Bleak. Utterly bleak. They concluded that no American tank gun currently in production could reliably penetrate the Panther's frontal armor at normal combat distances.
Wow. That's a stunning admission. So the official doctrine, the approved tactics, were what then? Flank shots. Get close.
That was it. Flanking maneuvers, which are great if you have the time, the terrain, and the coordination, but often impossible in the chaos of battle. Or close the distance, get inside maybe 500 yards, ideally much closer, to try for a shot at the turret side or the mantlet.
Which, given the Panther's gun range, basically meant you were accepting massive casualties. You're telling crews to charge into the teeth of a superior weapon.
It confirmed the crew's worst nightmares. The doctrine offered them tactics that were almost guaranteed to get them killed against the most common enemy tank they faced.
Okay, so Ordnance Command realizes they have a serious problem. The Sherman's gun is outmatched. A new tank isn't coming anytime soon.
Yeah.
What's the immediate fix?
The fix had to be the ammunition. If you can't easily make the gun bigger or better, you make the bullet smarter. This led to this crash program, really, to develop what became the T4 round, standardized as the M93. The hypervelocity armor-piercing round, or HVAP.
Hypervelocity, that sounds promising.
It was a fundamentally different approach to defeating armor, not just brute force, but applied physics. It was designed specifically to counter that thick, sloped Panther armor.
So how did it work? What made it hypervelocity?
Okay, think about the standard AP round, the M62. It's basically a solid chunk of steel. Relatively heavy, relatively slow. The HVAP, the M93, was different. It used a concept called a sabot.
Sabot. Like a shoe or a carrier.
Exactly. The actual penetrator, the part meant to go through the armor, was a small, incredibly dense core made of tungsten carbide.
Tungsten. Much denser than steel, right?
Almost twice as dense. This core was maybe only, say, 19 millimeters across. Very narrow. But this dense core was encased in a much larger but very lightweight body made of aluminum. This aluminum shell acted as the sabot.
So the aluminum part fills the gun barrel.
Right. It lets the small, heavy penetrator be fired from the existing 76 millimeter gun. When the round leaves the muzzle, the lightweight aluminum sabot peels away, discarded, leaving only the small, dense tungsten core flying towards the target at incredible speed.
I see. Less weight, same propellant charge, much higher velocity.
Precisely. And kinetic energy, the energy that does the penetrating, is calculated as half the mass times the velocity squared. Velocity is the crucial factor because it's squared in the equation.
So even a moderate increase in velocity gives a huge jump in energy.
A massive jump. The standard M62 AP round left the muzzle at around 2,600 feet per second. The HVAP round screamed out at 3,400 feet per second.
Wow, that's a big difference.
It translates to about 63% more kinetic energy right at the muzzle, 63% more punch.
And what did that mean in terms of actual penetration? Did it work against a Panther?
It absolutely worked. Proving round tests were stark, where the standard M62 AP could penetrate about 4.3 inches of armor plate at 1,000 yards.
Which wasn't enough for the Panther's front.
Right. The HVAP, at the same range and angle, could punch through 7 inches of armor.
7 inches, okay, that is enough. Even against the Panther's turret mantlet, which was tough, maybe 4.5 inches effective thickness.
Exactly. The standard round struggled to penetrate the mantlet even at point-blank range, maybe 100 yards. The HVAP could reliably penetrate the Panther's mantlet out to 800, maybe even 1,000 yards.
So suddenly the engagement envelopes change completely. The Sherman crew actually has a chance at realistic combat ranges.
They finally had a tool that could give them something approaching parity, yes, if they had the round.
There's the catch. If this stuff was so good, why wasn't every Sherman loaded to the gills with it?
One word, tungsten. That super dense core material was the critical bottleneck.
Tungsten was rare.
Extremely rare and extremely difficult to get in the quantities needed. The main global source pre-war and during the early war was Hunan province in China,
Which by 1944 was.
largely occupied or heavily contested by the Japanese. Supply lines were disrupted. What little tungsten ore did get out had to travel overland through Burma, then maybe India, often relying on dangerous airlift operations over the Himalayas, the famous hump flights.
That sounds incredibly precarious. What about domestic sources?
There were some mines in the U.S., Colorado, Nevada, but they could only supply maybe 30% of the total strategic demand for tungsten.
And HVAP wasn't the only thing that needed it, I assume.
Not even close. Tungsten was vital for making high-speed tool steel, which you need to manufacture literally everything else for the war effort: planes, ships, engines. It was also critical for machine gun barrels, naval gun liners, and importantly, armor-piercing cores for bomber armament and naval shells.
So you have this incredibly scarce resource and multiple critical demands for it. Someone had to decide who got priority.
Right. And the War Production Board made those tough calls. They looked at the overall strategic picture, winning the air war over Germany, winning the Battle of the Atlantic. These required massive amounts of tungsten for bomber defense guns and naval projectiles.
And tank ammunition.
Tank ammunition, especially this new specialized HVAP round, ended up lower on the priority list. The thinking, rightly or wrongly, was probably that tank battles were more localized, whereas losing the ability to build ships or defend bomber formations could slow down the entire Allied war effort.
But the consequence for the guys in the tanks was brutal.
Catastrophic. The actual allocation of tungsten for 76 millimeter HVAP was minimal, tiny. The result was that most Sherman crews received maybe 3 to 5 rounds per tank.
3 to 5, that's it.
That's it. Some units, some tanks received none at all, right up to the end of the war.
So you have this potential miracle round.
Yeah.
The only thing that gives you a real edge against the Panther at range.
And you're told to hoard it like it's the crown jewels. Use it only for a perfect shot, a guaranteed kill, which in the chaos of combat rarely presents itself cleanly. It created this awful psychological burden on top of the physical threat.
So let's put all these pieces together. You've got the deadly Panther threat, which is now common. You've got the HVAP round, which is the only effective counter at range.
Yeah.
That's incredibly scarce. And you've got this rigid doctrine still telling crews how to fight and what ammo to prioritize. It sounds like a recipe for disaster in the field.
It absolutely was a total crisis point. The official doctrine, that reliance on combined arms, let the tank destroyers handle the tanks, call in air support, use artillery. It just wasn't working consistently in the fast-paced, close-in fighting in France.
Engagements were happening too quickly, right? No time to wait for the TDs to arrive or the fighter bombers to show up.
Exactly. A Panther could appear out of the mist or around a hedgerow, and the engagement was happening now in seconds. The support elements, the ones Doctrine relied on, were often minutes or even hours away.
And the Doctrine still treated the Panther like some kind of rare, heavy beast, when in reality,
it was the main event. It was the tank they were running into constantly. The Doctrine was fundamentally mismatched to the operational reality of 1944.
Which brings us back to that lethal calculation inside the turret. The seconds mean death problem. Let's walk through that again. A Sherman spots a Panther at, say, 1,000 meters.
Okay. The loader, Corporal Hartley in our earlier example, he's following the manual. Technical Manual 9X1731B, what's in the ready rack?
High explosive, HEA, because he's supposed to be ready for infantry or gun emplacements.
Right. So first, he and the gunner TC realize, okay, that's a Panther, HE is useless. Step 1. Step 2, he now needs the AP round, or ideally the HVAP. Where is it?
Stowed deep in the hull somewhere, not right next to him.
Exactly. So he has to unlock the turret basket traverse, maybe spin the turret slightly, physically reach down into the hull storage bins, identify the right round in the dim light, wrestle it out. These things are heavy. Get back to the breech, open the breech, load it, close the breech.
How long does all that take? Under fire, presumably, or about to be.
Best case, maybe 8 seconds. More realistically, under stress, maybe 10, 12, even 15 seconds.
And during those 10 to 15 seconds, what's the Panther crew doing?
They saw the Sherman too. They know their gun works at this range. They're probably already loaded. They likely started the day with AP loaded. They're aiming carefully, calmly, because they believe they're invulnerable at this distance. And then they fire.
So the official loading sequence, dictated by Doctrine, literally guarantees the Sherman crew is fumbling for the right ammo, while the Panther crew is taking the killing shot.
It's horrifyingly simple. The Doctrine was getting them killed before they could even fight back effectively.
And then you add the scarcity issue. Even if they had HVAP, the guidance was, don't waste it.
Right. Conserve the tungsten, use the standard AP first, see if that works, which they knew it wouldn't against the front plate, and only use the precious HVAP if you absolutely have to.
It's completely counterintuitive from a survival perspective.
Totally. The crews figured it out very quickly. Saving the HVAP round often meant losing the tank and the crew. What good is conserved tungsten to a dead crew? The tactical reality completely overruled the strategic conservation guidance.
And this disconnect wasn't just about ammo, it went right back to their basic training, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Fort Knox, 17 weeks of intensive training. But what were they training against?
Based on 1942 intelligence, essentially. Panzer III's, maybe early Panzer I's.
Exactly. Panther targets, realistic Panther engagement scenarios, they didn't really make it into the main training syllabus until very late in 1944, if at all, for many crews heading overseas earlier.
So the core tactical principles they were drilled on
were based on American doctrine: be aggressive, close the distance, engage the enemy at under 500 yards. Which was fine against older tanks.
But against a Panther, closing to under 500 yards was basically driving into its optimal kill zone. You were doing exactly what the German designers hoped you'd do.
Precisely. The training was actively preparing them to fight the wrong war, teaching them tactics that were almost guaranteed to result in catastrophic losses against the Panther.
Just pause on that for a second. Imagine being one of those tankers. You're young, you're trained, you're motivated, you get to France, and you realize the tactics you spent months perfecting are actually suicidal against the main threat you face. The psychological impact must have been immense.
Crushing. Demoralizing. And that's why the change had to come from the bottom up. It wasn't going to come from the manuals or the training centers quickly enough. It came from the sergeants, the loaders, the gunners, the guys living and dying by these split-second decisions.
So this grassroots tactical revolution, as you called it, it wasn't formal. It was just crews talking to crews.
Pretty much. The logic at the crew level was simple and undeniable. If HVAP is the only thing that gives us a fighting chance against the #1 killer out there, then HVAP must be the first round in the breach. Period.
Consequences be damned.
Right. They accepted the risk of getting chewed out, maybe worse. They accepted that they'd have less HE immediately available if they ran into infantry first. But the overriding priority became surviving that initial contact with enemy armor.
And this wasn't written down anywhere. It just spread.
It spread through those informal networks that exist in any army. Sergeants bumping into each other behind the lines, crews sharing stories after a battle. Hey, did you hear about C Company? They lost 3 tanks yesterday. Were they loading HE first? Yeah. Well, we started putting the HVAP in the rack first. Seems to work better. It was survival knowledge passed through whispers and nods.
So crews who adapted survived at higher rates.
The anecdotal evidence piled up very quickly. Units that stuck rigidly to the manual, loading HE first, conserving HVAP, they took horrific losses when facing Panthers. Units where crews started quietly defying the regs and loading HVAP first, they started getting kills. They started surviving.
Which brings us back to Arracourt, September 19th, 1944. This becomes the critical test case, the moment this informal doctrine gets validated under fire.
Exactly. You have Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division CCA under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, a really aggressive, effective commander. They're moving forward into that thick fog we talked about.
And they know they're facing elements of the German 5th Panzer Army.
Yeah, and importantly, these German units had just been refitted. They had a high proportion of Panthers, many of them brand new. The Germans actually had local superiority in numbers and, on paper, in technology.
And they were confident. Why wouldn't they be? Their doctrine told them they outranged the Shermans.
Absolutely. German crews had been trained, and experience had largely confirmed that the American 75mm and even the 76mm guns were basically harmless beyond 1,000 meters. They expected to see the Shermans take their time, aim, fire, and destroy them before the Americans could even load a round that mattered.
Okay, so the scene is set. Foggy morning, confident Panthers, advancing Shermans. Then the contact happens.
Around 8.15 hours, the fog starts to lift just enough. The crew of Staff Sergeant Denton's Sherman spots the first Panther. It's looming out of the mist at about 1,200 meters.
1,200 meters, well outside the Sherman's effective range, according to the book, using standard ammo.
Way outside. A shot with standard AP would have been pointless, just bounced off. But Corporal Hartley had already done his work. That M93 HVAP round was sitting in the breech, ready to go.
So Denton makes the call.
His gunner, Corporal Vincent Mills, lays the crosshairs on the Panther. Denton knows the range is extreme for doctrine, but he also knows what's in the gun. He gives the order, fire when ready. He's trusting the round, trusting his crew, trusting that informal knowledge.
And the shot.
The 76mm gun fires. That HVAP round, traveling at that incredible 3,400 feet per second, covers the 1,200 meters in just 1.4 seconds, barely over a second flight time.
Unbelievably fast. Where did it hit?
Right on the turret mantlet. A tough spot, but the HVAP had the energy. It punched through the armor. The result was immediate and catastrophic secondary explosions inside the Panther, flames erupting from the turret.
How long did the whole engagement take, from sighting to kill?
Reports say about 18 seconds. Think about that. 18 seconds from first sight to a burning wreck at a range considered safe by the enemy.
And this wasn't just Denton's tank, right? This was happening across the front.
That's the critical part. It wasn't a one-off lucky shot. All across CCA sector, other Sherman crews who had made the same decision loading HVAP first were having similar experiences. They were engaging and destroying Panthers at ranges between 800 and, in some cases, up to 1,400 meters.
They were using the HVAP's velocity and penetration to basically ambush the Panthers before the German crews even realized they were in danger.
Exactly. They seized the initiative in those opening moments. The impact on the battle was immediate and measurable. By about 9 a.m., just 45 minutes after the first contact, Abrams Combat Command A had knocked out 14 Panthers.
14. And their own losses.
Significantly lighter. 5 American vehicles lost 2 tank destroyers and 3 Shermans. So a kill ratio of nearly 4.1 in favor of the Americans in those initial clashes.
Which is completely upside down compared to what you expect based purely on the tank's technical specs.
Totally. The German assumptions of invulnerability at range, coupled with maybe some poor reconnaissance in the fog, worked fatally against them. But the key factor was the American crews using the right ammunition first.
And Abrams recognized this immediately.
Oh, yeah. Abrams was sharp. He knew something significant had happened. His after-action report, filed later that same day around 3 p.m., didn't just report the kills, it documented why it happened.
What did he say?
He noted the surprisingly favorable exchange ratio and then explicitly stated the core findings, something like HVAP rounds, when available and loaded, first provide Sherman crews with effective capability against Panther tanks at normal combat ranges. He put it right there in the official report.
That's huge. That's field validation making its way almost instantly into the formal reporting chain.
It was. The Battle of Arracourt continued for about 10 days until September 29th. The overall results were stark. The Germans lost around 200 tanks and assault guns in the sector. American losses were about 48 Shermans.
A major victory, largely thanks to this unauthorized tactical shift.
It absolutely validated the practice. And it had a ripple effect. The Germans couldn't rely on long-range immunity anymore.
It must have changed their behavior.
Reports suggest it did. German tank crews became much more cautious about exposing themselves at longer distances. That confidence, that assumption they could dominate the engagement beyond 1,000 meters was shaken. The knowledge that any Sherman might be carrying that HVAP round ready to fire first forced them to adapt their own tactics.
So the word gets out from Arracourt. Abrams reports it. Does it reach higher command quickly?
It does, partly thanks to who was paying attention. General George Patton, commanding the Third Army, which included the 4th Armored Division, was known for his focus on armored warfare. He visited Abrams' division literally the day after that initial clash, September 20th.
Patton himself, what did he make of it?
His diary entry for that day is quite revealing. He wrote something along the lines of, "Visited Wood's division today," referring to General John S. Wood, commander of 4th Armored, killing Panthers at ranges I did not believe possible for the 76mm gun.
So even Patton was surprised by the performance.
Exactly, and he immediately grasped the key. "The new ammunition makes the difference," he wrote, adding, "We need more of it."
That's high-level recognition right there. Did Patton's interest help spread the word?
It certainly didn't hurt. Patton's acknowledgement lent weight to what the crews already knew. By October 1944, within weeks of Arracourt, that informal guidance load HVAP first, if you expect Panthers, was circulating pretty widely, at least at the battalion level, throughout the Third Army. It wasn't official doctrine yet, but it was becoming accepted practice.
And did the numbers back it up later? Was there analysis done after the war?
Yes, there was. Post-war studies, like those by the Army Ballistic Research Laboratory, looked at combat reports and loss data. They found a significant difference. Shermans, using only standard ammo against Panthers, had a kill ratio of roughly 2.6 to 1, meaning they killed 2.6 Panthers for every Sherman lost in such encounters.
Okay, still positive, but
when they looked at engagements where Shermans were confirmed to be using HVAP, especially prioritizing it for the first shot, the ratio jumped to 4.1 kills per loss.
wow, from 2.6 to 4.1. That's a massive increase in effectiveness, purely down to having the right ammo ready first. It highlights the value of that first decisive shot.
Immense value. And the Germans noticed too very quickly. We found German reports from the time that confirm it. There's one from the 113th Panzer Brigade, dated September 23rd, just 4 days after the Arracourt fighting started.
What did the German report say?
It noted, and I'm paraphrasing, that enemy Sherman tanks are now engaging our Panthers at ranges previously considered safe. And significantly, it added that the effects suggest tungsten core projectiles.
So the Germans identified the cause almost immediately. They knew their armor wasn't holding up like it used to.
They knew something had changed, yeah. Their technological edge at range had been neutralized, at least partially.
Okay, so you have battlefield proof, statistical validation emerging, high-level commanders like Patton are aware, even the enemy recognizes it. Surely the official doctrine must have changed quickly then.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But institutional change, especially in wartime, can be incredibly slow. Despite Arracourt, despite Patton, the official technical manuals weren't immediately updated.
Why the delay? Bureaucracy? Resistance to change?
Probably a combination of factors. The strategic focus on tungsten conservation was still there. Maybe some reluctance to admit the initial doctrine and training had been flawed. It actually took another major shock to the system to force the change through formally.
Which was?
The Battle of the Bulge. The massive German Ardennes offensive that kicked off in December 1944. The sudden appearance of large numbers of German heavy tanks, including King Tigers alongside Panthers, created another crisis and highlighted the absolute necessity of maximizing the Sherman's anti-tank capability.
So the bulge finally forced the issue.
It seems so. Formal authorization finally came down on December 29, 1944. First Army Headquarters issued tactical guidance that explicitly permitted, even recommended, loading HVAP as the primary round when heavy German tanks like Panthers or Tigers were expected.
December 29th, 1944. That's over 3 months after Arracourt.
3 critical months. The doctrine finally caught up with the reality that Corporal Hartley and others had recognized back in September, but it was a long, costly delay.
And even then, the supply issue never really went away, did it? Just because it was authorized didn't mean they suddenly had loads of HVAP.
Not at all. The tungsten scarcity was a constant throughout the war. Total production of 76mm HVAP rounds by VE Day in May 1945 was only around 24,000 rounds.
24,000, spread across the entire European theater.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot, but when you divide it among the thousands of Shermans in service, it means many tanks, many units, likely fought the entire war with only a handful of these crucial rounds, or perhaps none at all. The authorization changed, but the physical lack of the ammunition remained a huge constraint for many crews right to the end.
So what happened to the guys who started it all? Denton, Hartley.
Like so many soldiers, their extraordinary actions were just part of doing the job under fire. Staff Sergeant Denton made it through the war, went back home to Texas, worked as a mechanic. Apparently, he never saw his decision at Arracourt as some brilliant innovation, just, as he put it, common sense applied under pressure.
And Corporal Hartley, the loader who actually put the round in the breech against orders.
No medals, no official commendations mentioned in the records we have. He did what he felt was necessary to keep himself and his crew alive, and thankfully, he survived the war too. Just another soldier making impossible choices.
But their actions and the HVAP round itself had a lasting impact beyond just the Sherman, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. The experience with HVAP, this idea of using a dense subcaliber penetrator inside a lightweight SEBA to achieve hypervelocity, that became the fundamental concept behind almost all modern kinetic energy tank ammunition.
So today's tank rounds trace their lineage back to this.
Directly. The AP-FSDS rounds armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding SABA that are standard on tanks like the M1 Abrams today. They operate on the exact same principle pioneered by the M93 HVAP back in '44. Maximize velocity by shedding weight, concentrate the energy into a dense penetrator. The materials and engineering are vastly more sophisticated now, of course, but the core physics concept started right there, born out of desperation in WWII.
It's incredible. This whole story, really, from the doctrinal flaws to the desperate innovation in the turret to the validation at Arracourt, it feels like a microcosm of how warfare forces adaptation.
It really is. It shows that sometimes the most critical decisions, the ones that actually change outcomes, aren't made in the planning rooms by generals looking at maps. They're made by junior leaders, by sergeants and corporals, facing the immediate reality of combat and realizing the official plan isn't going to work.
They understood the ground truth in a way the higher-ups couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge quickly enough.
Exactly. The formal system, the doctrine, was too slow, too rigid. It took the undeniable evidence written in, as you said earlier, blood and burning steel at places like Arracourt, to finally force the institution to learn, to adapt, to catch up to the reality its soldiers were facing.
We tend to focus on the big planned innovations, the Manhattan projects, the B-29s, but this story highlights that sometimes crucial breakthroughs come from the edge, from necessity, from individuals making rational choices to defy orders simply because the orders were wrong and survival depended on it.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other crucial technologies or tactics that we rely on today perhaps started life as an unauthorized field modification, a desperate workaround by someone who knew the manual just wasn't going to cut it? It's a fascinating question about innovation under pressure.